Shalom, Israel. Grace and blessing from God the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ be unto you. All praise to the Most High that we made it another week to another Sabbath day, and even to another month since last night was the new moon, and to another year because it's officially the new year according to the Hebrew calendar. So all praises to the Most High for that. I do just want to make sure everything is going smoothly with the tech and whatnot because okay, so it appears we are live on YouTube and Facebook. So all praises to the Most High for that. Let me just go ahead and make sure all that is functioning properly because I had a hiccup with it this week as well. I just got on here soon enough to make sure that it was going to work. So I had to, rework some things. So I'm just going to make sure that we are live. We are good to go. This week as well. I just got on here soon enough to... Okay, all praises to the Most High. We are on Facebook. Check that first instead of YouTube for some reason. But let me just go ahead and jump to YouTube as well. Make sure we're live on YouTube. We should be. Instead of YouTube for some reason. But let me just go ahead and okay, all praises to the Most High. We are live on YouTube as well. Praises to the highest. So, unfortunately, and my apologies to those who were expecting me to do the lesson last week. I tried and it wasn't connecting based on, internet and technical issues. But this week, I'm just going to carry on with that same lesson that I had planned. And yes, because it's still relevant information as far as I can tell. So I'm going to jump on into that. And y'all give me a minute. Some things that I've seen as far as news is concerned this week. You have a Ugandan woman who has been arrested for slavery in the UK because she brought with her an African slave, human trafficking and whatnot. So I haven't looked into that enough to actually make any real stances on it. It could be that they are framing her for this, but it also could be that this is a Hamite woman bringing an Israelite slave on into the UK, and the UK is like, hey, you can't do this, right? Very possible, very possible. So also another thing that I saw was Lil Yachty had claimed that BLM was a scam, which it was, by the way. I had seen that. I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know whether he is saying that from the point of view of like how an Israelite would say that, how a righteous man would say that, and that is, BLM was more about pushing the alphabet community agenda, and it was a means of scamming the people into this political ideology which will not save them, or if it was from a more Republican conservative type perspective of BLM to actually causing more damage to the city or whatever. I don't know what perspective he has, but hey, that's an accurate thing that he said. But I didn't even see too much of that clip to even do any kind of real lesson on that. So that's why I just mentioned it here. Y'all give me 1 second. All right. Let's see. Okay. Perhaps. Yeah. Okay. All right. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pull this screen down and we'll get started with the lesson. All right. Pull it down to about right there. That's about good. Then we'll actually jump into it. Come on now. It said, this is an article by AP that was put out last week. So March the 7th. This is what I was going to do last week. I'm going to just go ahead and do it this week because it's still pretty relevant. San Carlos Apache teenager's death reverberates throughout Indian country. All right. So, this is a Gadite sister who was, kidnapped and killed, I believe. From heartbreak and devastation to outrage, Emily Pike's tragic death is stirring heavy emotions and spotlighting a crisis that has long plagued Native American communities, where a disproportionate number of people have been killed or have gone missing. You see that right there. So the same thing that I was talking about in my Deuteronomy 28 lesson. that I don't know if it's Deuteronomy 28 or Leviticus 26 when I brought up these stats, but oh yeah, it was Leviticus 26 when I was bringing up these stats on when it comes to like police killings, for example. The total number of like police killing Native Americans is not as high as like any of the other ethnicity and demographic groups here in America, but the proportion at which they do it is scary, right? The same with as I said right here, a disproportionate number of people have been killed or gone missing, right? So that's what happens with the Native American community. All right, the so-called Native American, the so-called American Indian, the so-called indigenous, all right, because it's really Israelites, all right? But the fact that these people have been brought so low in number, that means that they're not really cared about by the rest of society. Nobody really pays attention to what's going on because their population group has been brought down to such a low number. And we're going to get into that a little later as to why that is. I've already talked about it when breaking down Deuteronomy 28, but we'll cover that again just in case y'all didn't see that on the Learning the Word lessons. All right. So it says, in the case of the San Carlos Apache teenager, she disappeared from her group home in a Phoenix suburb in late January. Authorities posted her picture on social media saying she was missing and had possibly run away. Sheriff's deputies in a neighboring county reported finding Pike's remains nearly a month later and more than 80 miles from where she was last seen. Since then, news of her brutal death has reverberated through Indian country and beyond. A crowd gathered Thursday at an intersection in Mesa near her group home to honor Pike's life and to press for changes that might help curb the violence. And the fact that it's in Mesa is pretty crazy because I've visited Mesa. I've visited the some of the people in Mesa. It's mostly Issaquah and Mesa, but there's also Gad that we've talked to out there as well. We've talked to a lot of people out there as far as like trying to spread the word. Dozens of people of all ages from various tribal nations viewed the vigil's program on a large inflatable projector. Clad in red, they embraced shielded candle flames on the windy night and held posters that read "No More Stolen Sisters" and "Justice for Emily Pike." Right, because this the fact they're using the slogan "No More Stolen Sisters," this is a huge problem when it comes to young so-called Native American women. Is the kidnapping, murder, and the SA, the sexual assault of these sisters, right? So this is a big problem. 4 of Pike's cousins, all close in age to her, recounted a girl they knew as funny, kind, and a happy person who loved animals, K-pop, and Roblox. Jaden Palmer, 15, says she and Tyrea Steele, another 15-year-old cousin, grew up with Pike on the San Carlos Apache Reservation. The 3 were always by each other's side and laughing, Palmer said. She said Pike would call her every so often, and the last time they spoke was just weeks before she disappeared. In their last conversation, Pike shared she was going to return to the reservation within a month. Palmer and Steele became excited about the shopping trips they wanted to plan. "We're not going to have a trio anymore," Palmer told the Associated Press, her voice choking up with Steele by her side. Tony Duncan and his 12-year-old daughter performed a jingle dance, which he said has an origin of healing. Duncan's father spoke in Apache before the dance and sang a lullaby. Mary Kim Titla, a member of the San Carlos Apache tribe, wore pink, Pike's favorite color, to the vigil and said the teen had dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. "These tears that are shed are a part of a healing process," Titla said. Titla has 3 female relatives who went missing and were killed. You see that right there? So it's a big problem. As I said in the first paragraph, this is disproportionate among so-called American Indian populations. She said the community has come together to honor Pike and to demand justice. This shared solidarity comes from a desire for healing from historical and generational trauma. She said, "It affects so many people," Titla said, "and I think the reason is because we all know someone," right? So it seems among American Indian communities, everyone knows someone who's gone missing or has been killed. All right. Advocates say the crisis stems from colonization and forced removal, which marginalize indigenous people by erasing their culture and identity. All right. So that's one thing that's shared among so-called blacks and among so-called natives, right, is the erasure of identity. All right. And we'll get into that. That's one of the one of the characteristics of Israelites in the last days is the erasure of identity and culture. All right, limited funding, understaffed police departments, and a jurisdictional checkerboard that hinders authorities from working together have only exacerbated the issue. Right, so you when it comes to like tribal lands and reservations, right? Because of the treaties that have been worked out, like technically tribal lands, technically reservations aren't a part of America, right? So then they don't fall under the jurisdiction of police departments, right? So then the police can't really operate there, or really, if we're being honest, don't really want to, don't really care to operate there. All right, so you have this weird line between, a desired autonomy amongst the American Indian communities and then a lack of ability to prevent such things like what we're reading about here. All right. It says Pike's case has drawn attention across social media. Some people have shared photos of themselves, their mouths covered with a red handprint that has become emblematic of the movement to end the violence. Posts include the hashtags No More Stolen Sisters, Say Her Name, and Justice for Emily. In Wisconsin, organizers plan for their own candlelight vigil. Flowers in Colorado encourage people to wear red, and Daisy Blue Star, a Southern Ute tribal member on Colorado's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Task Force, posted a video about Pike. The girls' basketball team at Miami High School in Arizona wore jerseys with MMIW and a red handprint on the back. MMIW, I don't know exactly what that means. Perhaps missing or murdered indigenous women. I don't know exactly what that means. We're all mourning this terrible loss of a precious young girl. Emily really has become everyone's daughter and granddaughter and niece, Titla said. So I was just kind of looking up to see if it showed what MMIW means, but it don't. Pike remains were found northeast of Globe, Arizona. The Gila County Sheriff's Office said, like many others, her case involves multiple agencies. Gila County is working with Mesa Police, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Mesa Police assign cases of children who have run away and are missing to investigators who follow up on tips, according to police spokesperson Brandy Myers. Pike had run away 3 times prior from the group home, Myers said. The Arizona Department of Child Safety requires notification of a child's missing status to occur within a day of receiving the information. However, that requirement doesn't extend to tribal social services. You see that right there? So the State Department of Arizona doesn't really have jurisdiction over the tribal land. That's why it doesn't extend to tribal social services. It's in this really instead of citizenship. The so-called Native Indians, similar to so-called Black Americans, have what should be referred to as like denizenship, what it really is. They may say citizenship, but it's really like denizenship, meaning like you live here, but you don't really have all the same rights and protections as, like, for example, like so-called European settlers who came over here and took the land, right? And people who live in, like, your normal U.S. counties, your normal states, right? Like there's this murky and muddy water of like legal things to really disenfranchise, if we're being honest, the so-called American Indian. All right. It says that requirement doesn't extend to tribal social services, according to Anika Robinson, president of the nonprofit foster care advocacy group ASA Now. Pike was in the custody of San Carlos Apache Tribe Social Services, which could not be reached for comment at the time she went missing from the group home in Mesa, right? So the Apache Tribe Social Services, could there be some corruption there? There more than likely is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like all these so-called Native Americans are just victims and they're all, they all just are good and righteous people. No, the reason why we're in these conditions is because we don't follow the Most High the way that we should. So there could very well be corruption in that group, if not in this specific case, then in other areas, right? But it could just be that they have their hands tied with other things, other issues, and this is on their desk, but they haven't gotten to it, which may say something about them. Mesa police reported Pike as missing to the National Crime Information Center the evening of January 27th. The same day police got word of her disappearance. Police have said it would have been up to the group home to contact her case manager, who then would have contacted Pike's family or tribe. Pike's mother, Steph Docela, has said in interviews that she didn't hear about her daughter's disappearance until a week later. That's crazy. Robinson questioned why it took so long. Imagine what probably had already transpired by that week, she said. Right? So the fact that her mother didn't know that her daughter was gone until a week after she was gone, like what's going on there? How come she's not in her life more than that? That's pretty wild. That is pretty wild. Okay, so yeah, we're about to the end of this article. Then we'll get into some scriptures. All right. I have some other things, but yeah, we'll get into some scriptures. But anyway, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs in 2023 created a task force to identify police policies for addressing the high rates of disappearances and killings among the Native American population. A final report is due in 2026. Washington, New Mexico, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Wyoming have created similar task forces. President Donald Trump, during his first term, created the nation's first task force to begin looking at the problem, dubbing it Operation Lady Liberty. And of course, they would call it Operation Lady Liberty. That's like your whole Manifest Destiny and a whole bunch of other things with Lady Liberty I'm not going to get into. The Biden administration followed with a special unit within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. U.S. attorneys' offices in key areas began taking a closer look at unsolved cases, and top officials held listening sessions across the nation. Last month, the federal government launched an initiative to help solve missing and unidentified person cases. Tiffany Giron, executive director of the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, said more comprehensive law enforcement training that addresses jurisdictional challenges, increased funding for tribal programs that provide shelter, mental health resources, and legal aid to impacted families and survivors, and strengthened alert systems are among the policy solutions for which advocates should continue to fight. I'm getting a little tripped up over my words here. As an indigenous people, we are not invisible, she said. We deserve just as much attention from law enforcement. Our cases are involving real people, real families, real children. All right? So, with that, let's go ahead and get into some scriptures on this. This specifically, I'll touch on, and then, we'll get to some other things and go more generally about Native Americans and their presence in the Word of God, who they are, who they come from, where they come from, all right? So this specifically, let's get Lamentations, and this is a general scripture concerning Native Americans as well, but to get to the point of what we're talking about here is later on down in the chapter. We're going to start with verse 1 in Lamentations chapter 5. It says, "Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach. Our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens," right? So our inheritance, our land has been given to other people, to strangers, right? We are orphans and fatherless. Our mothers are as widows, right? So the proportion at which the Native American men die from police violence is actually more than that of any other demographic in America, all right? But also you can look at it like, during colonization, the men will go out to war and die, and then that leaves the children and the women. We have drunken our water for money, our wood is sold unto us. Now, in some cases, in some areas out in Arizona, it's actually the natives who own all the water, but in most cases, that is not the case. It is the Native Americans have to pay for their resources just like everybody else. Our necks are under persecution. We labor and have no rest. All right, so most Native Americans got jobs just like everybody else and cannot afford to live just like everybody else. We have given the hand to the Egyptians and to the Assyrians to be satisfied with bread, right? You had to make deals with the oppressors, right? Egyptians And Assyrians are two of our former oppressors, two of our former slavers, all right? To be satisfied with bread. Our fathers have sinned and are not, and we have borne their iniquities, right? So the reason why we're in this condition that we're in is because our fathers fell away from the Creator, from the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, our forefathers, right? So later on down the line, our forefathers fell off from keeping the commandments, and we have to go through the curses that were really inflicted on them initially. Because the reason why we go through the same things is because we do the same things as our fathers. All right? Servants have ruled over us. There is none that doth deliver us out of their hand. A lot of people don't realize that's where Esau was for the longest time, as servants to the Israelites. All right? We get our bread with the peril of our lives because of the sword of the wilderness. I ain't even going to say the longest time, but from the time of, like, say, Saul and David, or actually more specifically under David, to the time of Jotham, so like 100 years or so. A couple 100 years, 200 years maybe. We got our bread with the peril of our lives because of the sword of the wilderness. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine, right? So it talks about the hyperpigmentation that happened among the Israelites. It only happens with melanated people. Hyperpigmentation would never happen to the Ashkenazim, all right? Would never happen to the Jewish people, all right? This ain't talking about them. This is talking about the real Israelites. Verse 11, this is the point I wanted to get to. They ravished the women in Zion and the maids in the cities of Judah, all right? So that's specifically talking about Judah and Jerusalem, but it applies to the northern kingdom as well. They ravished our women, and they kidnapped, as I said, the maids, right? The young women, all right? It says, princes are hanged by their hand, the faces of the elders were not honored, right? They've oppressed the people in general by hangings, as it says here. And yes, they did the hangings to the so-called indigenous first before they even brought the so-called blacks over here, all right? But let me turn my phone on silent real quick. Whoever's texting me should know better. Yes. Yes, brother, I'm on. I don't know if you saying it or not. Of course I'm on. I checked to make sure that I was, and let me just make sure again that I'm on. I am. You should already know. Anyway. Let's go to Psalms chapter 10. Psalms chapter 10. To show what the wicked do. And they do this secretly, all right? They do things like this secretly. All right, so I'm going to skip around a little bit like I usually do when I go to this chapter. It's talking about the wicked in general, but specifically America is run by the wicked. All right, so Psalms 10, starting with verse 1. Why stand thou afar off, O Lord? Why hide thou thyself in times of trouble? Right, so you may get in a situation like this or be in a situation like this, so-called Native American, so-called American Indian communities, and say, where are you at, God? Where are you at? All right. The wicked in his pride does persecute the poor. All right. So you look at the people, it said she was in a group home, right? Emily Pike was in a group home. You don't really get much more poor than that. All right. He does persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined, right? So they will be, that's why we use this technology. As I've said many times, that's why we use this technology to cast down these imaginations, to teach against the wicked. All right, they're going to be taken in the devices that they have imagined. All right, so I'm going to jump down to verse 8. It said, he sitteth in the lurking places of the villages, in the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. All right, so you see that? That's exactly what happened with the sister. All right, she's a young child. All right, yet she was kidnapped and evidently she was murdered, right? He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth them into his net. You see that right there. So there had to be some sort of Because from everything that we have read about the situation, now I'm not an investigator. I don't know the case specifically, but from what we have read, she left the group home of her own volition, right? So it's very possible that she was lured somewhere, all right, by whoever this assailant was, all right. He croucheth and humbleth himself that the poor may fall by his strong ones, all right. So someone who was stronger than her ended up taking her life, all right. Verse 11, he hath said in his heart, God hath forgotten, he hideth his face, he will never see it. Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up thy hand, forget not the humble. All right. So, forget not the humble. Forget not the humble. So, from there, as far as the so-called Native Americans generally, all right, these are God's people. These are one of the tribes of Israel, all right? Starting with, let's go Deuteronomy. We'll start in Deuteronomy 33. We'll start in Deuteronomy 33. I'm kind of, yeah, we'll start with Deuteronomy 33. Why not? Why not? Because there's a lot of different Native American tribes, right? There's a lot of different Native American tribes. Why is that? How can we say this is just one of the tribes of Israel if there are so many different tribes? In Deuteronomy 33 and verse 20, it says, And of Gad he said, Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. You see it right there. So the Lord has enlarged Gad as far as in ancient times. And more specifically, medieval times, God had blessed Gad to become very populous, to cover the land from in Canada all the way to like Canada, as in like Nova Scotia, all the way to like California, right? So there's a lot of land being populated from the east coast of the U.S., like the Carolinas, all the way over to the Pacific Northwest, right? So there's a lot of area occupied by the so-called Native Americans, but these are Gadites, all right? And in Genesis, we'll go to Genesis. I don't want to leave Deuteronomy 33 because we're coming back to it. But blessed be he that enlargeth Gad. All right. All these different Native American tribes really only come from 7 families. All right. In Genesis, I believe it's 47. I could be mistaken. Genesis 47. No, maybe it's 46. Yes, those who went into Egypt. All right. So, jumping down to the one about Gad, to the verse about Gad. Where is that at? Here we go. Verse 16. It says, this is Genesis 46 and verse 16. It says, And the sons of Gad, Ziphion and Haggai, Shuni, Esbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. All right. So that's 7 different families of Gadites. All right. So of course the Lord had made them, had blessed them to that great extent. And I don't think I have the chart. I have a chart over here of like all the individual tribes, but I did have a chart at one point of the specific family, the family groups. Let's see if I can find that real quick, because it's not something that I included here. It's just something that I thought about as I'm talking about it. Let's see. Y'all give me a second. Would it be, well, it's not right there. It may even be an old phone. I don't know if it'd be on this one. I don't even know if it'd be on this phone. It doesn't look like it, actually. Because I got this on I got this phone like a year or 2 ago. Maybe even closer to 3 years at this point. But yeah, so I'm not seeing all the different family groups. Y'all give me a second. Because I can find it real quick, the specific chart that I'm talking about. Let's see. Yeah, Native American tribes. There we go. Let's see if I can find this on the images real quick. No. Map. Let me see. There was one specifically that I was looking for. Where is it at? So I did have that one at one point, but there's another one that I had. Let's see if I can find it. Because these are like breaking down the tribes within tribes, so to speak. That one's pretty close, but it's not the specific one that I had. This one's pretty close, but it's a little bit more complex than that. Yeah, so I probably, North America. Let's see if I can find it real quick. If I can't find it, I'll just move on. But you see it's about 7 different families. This one might work. Let's count the Inuits and whatnot, which the Inuits are Gadites, but let's see. Yeah, so none of these are the one that I'm thinking of specifically, but I may just have to use one to just to show what I'm talking about here, the 7 different families. Yeah, so let me see if I can work this out on here, because some of these I'm not quite sure of. All right, this one's pretty good. So when it comes to the southeastern tribe, I don't know if y'all can see this very well. May just have to move my thing over so y'all can see it. Can y'all see this? Yeah, y'all can see that. Y'all can see what I can see. Bet. All right, so bring that back down. All right, so you do have like the Inuit up here, and then you have like the First Nations. Those would be like 2, right? And then you get into the northeastern tribes, the Iroquois, Algonquin tribes. And then you have the Great Plains tribes, also known as like the Sioux. So that's 4. And then the southeastern, that's Reuben. So we're not counting them amongst the Gadites. That's Reubenites. Still of the tribes of Israel, but more of a different tribe, right? And then once you get over here to the southwest, you start getting into Issachar, right? So we're not counting them either when it comes to the Gadite families. But you still have the like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and really there's another one in here. So, and some of these southeastern might and western might intersect, right? But the point is, it's only 7 families. All right, it's only 7 families of Gadites, and that one may actually show it a little better, because you do get to like Iskarites and stuff like that. Yeah. So let me just jump back. It's only 7 families of Gadites. All right, it's only 7 families of Gadites. So when it says, "Blessed be he that enlargeth Gad," it makes sense whenever God blessed all these 7 different families, right? So now they become, a great nation. All right, so he dwelleth as a lion, right, very fierce in battle, and teareth the arm with the crown of the head, right? So they have, amongst Gadites, amongst American Indians, they have what was called a blood brother pact, right? Where different tribes would come together. When they come together in peace, they would cut the chiefs would come. Obviously, the chiefs had a fancy headdress with eagle feathers. They would cut the arms and then shake the hands, right? So it'd be a blood brother pact, all right? Tear the arm with the crown of the head. And he provided the first part for himself, right? So that's why the so-called Gadites live in America, right? Because America is the best part of the West, all right? It's not very hot as far as the tropical areas, and it's not, and it's got great farmland, right? It's a great land, all right? That's why Esau, whenever he took over the West, he really set up camp here in America, right? He really set up shop here in America, as opposed to Hispaniola. Even though he took over everything, what remained was America, because that's really the only place they were invested in. All the other areas that Esau, the Europeans, had taken, they just went back to Europe. They said, we're not really concerned with those areas. We'll let them go. America, we ain't letting go, because that's the best part, right? He provided the first part for himself, because there, in America, and a portion of the lawgiver was he seated, right? So that's why Gad retained the Israelite culture longer than the rest of the tribes over here, because most of the other tribes had already fallen off by the time Esau got over here. And Gad had to a certain extent, but they were the ones who held on to the customs the most out of all the tribes. So what I want to point out here, as far as in a portion of a lawgiver, right, was he seated. And he came with the heads of the people, meaning came with Ephraim and Manasseh. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel. And one of the judgments, one of the things that God had told us to do in Deuteronomy 6, it says, where is that right here? When it comes to the commandments, all right, and like where it says in verse 6 in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it says, and these words, which I command thee this day, shall be in thy heart, right? So the words of the law. Verse 9, it says, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates, all right? So also in Deuteronomy, I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 9, maybe chapter 10, maybe not 10, but maybe even 11. Where does it say? Here we go. So remember what it said, that law in Deuteronomy chapter 6. All right, that law in Deuteronomy chapter 6 said, write these laws upon the gates of your house, right? And on your house and upon your gates, right? It also says in verse 29 here in Deuteronomy 11, and it shall come to pass when the Lord thy God hath brought thee into the land, and unto the land whether thou goest to possess it, thou shalt put the blessing upon Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal, right? So what he means when he says this, he's saying reiterate the covenant at the base of a mountain. Reiterate the covenant at the base of a mountain when you go and take the land, right? And remember, Gad was the lawgiver. So here's something I want to point out about an artifact that most people don't know about. Most people don't know about the artifact here I say here in America, in New Mexico, all right? So this is from a book. This is from a book called The Discovery of Ancient America by David Allen Deal. You can't see the rest of his name there. But The Discovery of Ancient America by David Allen Deal. All right? It's a good book. Check it out. I only really got this because I'm only really pointing this out because it talks about the 10 Commandments on the stone. It says the view of Hidden Mountains, the name of the mountain in Los Lunas, New Mexico. The center of the picture is the 10 Commandment inscription on the lower right-hand corner of the large fallen outcropping. All right. So it says the secret of the hidden mountain on the right bank of the Rio Puercos, some 30 miles southwest of Albuquerque, in the brown, barren waste of Valencia County, New Mexico, stands a volcanic mesa. The people in general call it Hidden Mountain or Mystery Mountain, but the Indians retain its more ancient title, Cerro Los Moquihino, Cliff of the Strange Writings. All right, because since the people had fallen off, and I'll get that real quick, the part about the erasure of culture. In Jeremiah 17. Jeremiah 17 and verse 4. Jeremiah 17 verse 4, it says, and thou, and you, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee. Right? So it was a curse placed upon the Israelites that they would discontinue from their heritage. And I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in a land which thou knowest not. All right? So you're going to have to serve your enemies in a land you don't recognize. For ye have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. Right? So part of the Israelite experience, part of the curses of being an Israelite, is that you wouldn't know your culture. You would fall away from your culture, discontinue from your heritage, right? The erasure of culture. That's why they call it the Cliff of the Strange Writings, because the native Indians who lived in the area, they didn't really know what that was about anymore, all right? It says, these names aptly apply. For upon its slopes, a secret is revealed that, if accepted, would change the basic concepts upon which ancient American history is built. For few even dare its challenge. Nevertheless, the emerging evidence compels us to conclude that this wilderness region was in ancient times visited by adventurers from the Middle East. All right. Atop these natural volcanic ramparts is found the ancient ruins of a camp laid out in military fashion. That is, in a perimeter of small 1 or 2 man dugouts, which are called by some pit houses. For the most part, these foxholes are arranged at the rim of the mountain with a larger ceremonial ground and chieftain's complex in the western center of its heights. The perimeter dugouts hold a commanding view of all approaches to the mountain hideaway. and the only entrance is up a steep, narrow, and easily defended defile or dry wash. The layout is classical and is precisely how any ancient or modern army unit would defend its position against a hostile environment. Ample water is available less than a quarter mile away from either the Carrizo Wash or the Rio Puercos. The Rio Puercos is a tributary of the Rio Grande, which flows into the Gulf of Mexico and provides a natural highway to or from Hidden Mountain and the sea. So this is exactly what he's talking about right here when he's talking about Rio Puercos. Let me go ahead and pull this up if I can. All right, let's go to maps, because sometimes this thing wants to, act up, but I'll try it out here. All right, so let's zoom out. Zoom. Let's see if it'll work with me here. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Okay, so here we got the Gulf of Mexico. You see how the Rio Grande comes up right into, it's on the border of Texas, right? So the Rio Grande comes up through here, border of Texas and Mexico. Then this is the ocean, by the way. On Google Maps it says Gulf of America now. But this is the ocean, right? This is the Atlantic Ocean, all right? The Rio Grande goes all the way up through here, and it goes up through New Mexico right here, all right? And all the way up, you see how the Rio Grande follows up here? It don't really show until you zoom in a little. But it goes all the way up here. And let's see if I can find Los Lunas right here without looking it up. I might have to look it up. Because it's like up here towards that. Okay, here we go, Los Lunas. Los Lunas is right here. Did it show it? Did I look over it? That's Los Nutrias. I literally just seen it. No, here we go, Los Lunas right here, just south of Albuquerque, right? So there's a Rio Grande, as you can see, it goes all the way up to Los Lunas, all right? So that's what he's talking about, all right? So it says, at first, one might casually dismiss these ruins as some relic of a band of ancient Indians that roamed the area, right? Because that's literally what it was. When the people touched down from coming over here on boats, they wrote these laws when they got to the land at the base of a mountain, just like the law said to do in Deuteronomy 11 and in Deuteronomy 6, all right? But closer examination of the details makes such a conclusion patently amiss. Comparison of the building formations with other Indian sites proves them unique in the Americas, right? Because it's the first people to touch down, all right? But surprisingly similar to the finds in the Middle East. Yet the greatest shock, causing much disbelief and offhanded accusations of fraud, comes from the accompanying inscriptions found at the site. Lying along the winding trail leading to the campsite on top of the mountain, juts a fallen outcropping of native igneous basalt. On its face is carved. This is small, so I can't really see it. And inscription in ancient letters. Another short inscription is found at the summit of the mountain. The words chiseled on these rocks are without a doubt ancient Hebrew. All right. The greater inscription recites the Ten Commandments. The smaller reads, Yahweh is our mighty one. All right. The Tetragrammaton is our mighty one. The ramifications of these words, if authentically composed by an ancient scribe, are enormous, giving direct proof that a connection anciently existed between the Americas through explorations of mariners with the Middle East. All right, the evidence would tend to indicate naval power for some countries as nearly as 3,500 years ago, which no, it wouldn't have been that long ago. It is within this framework that we must examine the Ten Commandments of New Mexico, right? So I just got this right here, just showing a picture of what this is, all right? To resolve the issue of authenticity of the inscriptions, who wrote them and when, we must first address ourselves to the lettering style, language, and the translation of the text. The following is a photo of the actual inscription found in the Arroyo passageway leading to the summit of Hidden Mountain, often called Inscription Rock or Mystery Rock. So that's what the actual rock looks like, and here's that, transcribed. It says the upper right corner of the inscription has unfortunately been broken off. A reconstruction of the writing, therefore, is provided below, showing the missing section in place. All right. So let's go to the next one. This shows again the same thing. Various unsupported opinions about the meaning of Inscription Rock have been advanced over the years. Some attribute it to the Mormons, who, out of some fraudulent attempt to prove that the American Indians were descendants of Israelites, placed the writings so as to be found proof of their religious theory. Another pronounced the inscription to be a Greek Cypriot fantasy by totally disregarding known alphabets, juggling letters, by adding strodes and many consonants, thereby placing it so far from any scholarly pursuit that one can only label it unfortunate. Most of these opinions are based upon mere conjectures formulated out of lack of adequate information, data much more readily available today to everyone, right? So people try to claim, first of all, he just dismissed this Greek Cypriot theory because it makes no sense, because this is not anything that had to do with Greek letters. This is Hebrew letters, right? But the idea that this was like Mormons who did this, first of all, the people who come across this did not even know what it was, right? Much less Mormons understanding what Paleo Hebrew is and, like trying to forge something like this. It's just not likely, all right? So that's what I just clicked on. So here you have the, as it shows here, the modern Hebrew, or like Aramaic, Assyrian style Hebrew, right? Then you got Roman letters, which is what we use in the English alphabet. Then you have the Paleo Hebrew letters, all right? And then you have what's found on the rock. You see that right there, how it's mostly lined exactly and precisely with the Paleo Hebrew letters, except the same way that, like, if somebody read my handwriting, they would know it's English, but they know that I have my own flair to it, right? So it's not going to be a forgery, because forgers usually don't add that. They don't add a personal signature because they want it most accurately to the original language as possible, right? So it's more academic usually when it's a forgery. But when it's a real person, when it's a real scribe writing something down, they have their own flair to it. As you can see, the hey is a little different. The cough is a little different. The quaff is a little different. But the ta is a little different. But it's mostly lining up exactly. The heth is a little different, but it's mostly the same as the Paleo Hebrew. All right, that you find here at Los Lunas. Right, it's quite obviously the same language. It's just, an individual scribe has their own handwriting, right? And it's the same thing that you see here whenever he lines it up with the Ten Commandments in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, and obviously the English translation with it, right? So get this book. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. Mainly just discussing the language of the so-called Native Indians, and artifacts, some of the artifacts that you find over here. It's called Discovery of Ancient America by David Allen Deal. So let's get into when this came about and how, right? When the so-called Native Indians came over here and why even. How and why. All that is addressed in the scriptures in 2 Ezra 13. All right? Because we were reading the blessings in Deuteronomy, and it talked about when you go into the land, right? He provided the best part for himself, as a lawgiver, he's going to be seated, right? So it talked about the land. But it wasn't talking about ancient Israel. It was talking about a different land, all right? It said, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea the king, right? So that's the fall of the northern kingdom. The 10 tribes it's referring to is Ephraim, Manasseh, Gad, Reuben, Simeon, Issachar, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan. Those are the 10 tribes that made up the northern kingdom of Israel. And of course, in the southern kingdom, you had Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. All right? So that's the fall of the northern kingdom. That happened in 722 BC when Samaria fell to Shalmaneser V. All right? Whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, so came they into another land. Right? That would have been Iran. Southern Iran is where the people were placed, the land of the Medes. All right. I guess it could be North Iran too. So like the Medes is over there, but it specifically mentioned the river that they were placed by in 2 Kings 17. But they took this counsel among themselves that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt. So nobody had ever been over here before until those first. What we call indigenous today touched down, until those 10 tribes touched down, all right? that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land, right? So that was the original goal. And that's why Gad held on to it the longest, is because they were positioned in a place of a lawgiver. They would go to the other tribes and say, hey, you need to be keeping these laws. His word's going off. You need to do this. You need to do that. They were teaching them the laws, right? But it got to a point where the people fell off. All the people fell off. And Gad fell behind them as well. All right? It says, and they that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river. For the Most High then showed signs for them, and held still the flood till they were passed over. Right. So the Most High made it a gentle ride across the Atlantic, which was almost never seen before in those days. All right. Till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. So it took a year and a half to get over here, and the same region is called Arsareth. All right, so Arsareth, and I got some on Arsareth here. Let me show y'all Arsareth real quick. In the pictures, I got Arsareth. All right, y'all bear with me while I pull this up. I can pull either one. Let's go this one. It says, Arzareth, the name of the land beyond the great river, far away from the habitation of man, in which the 10 tribes of Israel will dwell, observing the laws of Moses until the time of the restoration, according to 4th Esdras 13-45. That's what we just read. Columbus identified America with this land. He said right there. So Columbus knew what land he was going to when he came over here. That's why he brought Luis de Torres with him, a Hebrew translator, because he knew he was going to encounter the Hebrews over here. He knew he was going to encounter those 10 tribes because he read Ezra. He knew about it. And he had this, this fantasy of him being a Messiah type figure. All right. That's who he believed he was. He believed he was a Messiah type figure to bring judgment to the world. Columbus, he thought of himself as a god, basically. So he said, yeah, of course we can go take over them Israelites over there. All right. Verse 46, it says, then dwelt they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come. All right. So the 10 tribes going to be living in Arsareth, as we just read. Columbus identified America with Arsareth, and he said the 10 tribes will be here until the last days. All right. So specifically, let's get back to Gad. All right. And we can get it out of that, and probably out of that as well. So in Genesis 49, actually, let's before we get to Genesis 49, let's get to I believe 1 Chronicles 5. I hardly ever read this one when it comes to the Gadites, but I believe it's 1 Chronicles 5 when we talk about the Gadites. All right. Okay, so yeah, so not just the Gadites, but the Reubenites and the half tribe of Manasseh. 1 Chronicles 5:18, it says, the sons of Reuben and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, of valiant men able to bear buckler and sword, and to shoot with bow, and skillful in war. All right, were 40 and 4,760 that went out to the war. Right, so when it comes to the Gadites, as we're talking about here, but also the Reubenites, half tribe of Manasseh, they were good with the bow and skillful in war. The guerrilla war tactics kept the Indian wars, because the so-called Indian wars were from like the 1500s, over here in America specifically, from the 1500s on into the 1900s, right? It lasted that long while the Gadites were being like depopulated by disease as well, only because of the skillful combat tactics, how skillful they were in war, the guerrilla warfare. Like, that's the only reason why the Indian Wars lasted so long. And if you go out west, they did not even conquer the tribes the way that they did out here in the east, right? It was more, hey, we conquered the general area, but they really didn't deplete them out there the way that they have out here. You know what I mean? Like, it's crazy that there was even a fight at all, right? And it lasted for centuries, all right? Because of how skillful the so-called American Indians were in war, how skillful the Gadites were in war, all right? 1 Chronicles 12, and I think it's verse 8. Is it verse 8? Yeah. Okay, here we go. It says, and of the Gadites, there separated themselves unto David into the hold of the wilderness men of might, and men of war fit for the battle, that can handle shield and buckler, whose faces were like the faces of lions, right? So the war paint was very prevalent, even in ancient times, all right? They would paint up their faces before they go to war, make their faces like lions, all right? And were as swift as the roes upon the mountains, right? Even the so-called Europeans over here called them wind walkers, called the people wind walkers because of how swift they were, how they moved through the trees and the mountains, all right? It's the same spirits that were on the people in ancient days, all right? It's the same abilities that they had in ancient times, all right? How skillful they were in war. But, okay, if they're so skillful in war, what happened? Well, that's one of the curses. That's one of the, I'll read it in Leviticus. In Leviticus 26, because I'm going over the curses in Deuteronomy 28. If you want to hear the curses, listen to those classes. I'm doing whole breakdowns of all Deuteronomy 28. Did half of the curses this week. We'll do the next half of the curses next week. All right. So Leviticus 26. Here we go. Where is the one? Where's the one about losing battle? All right. Here we go. So I'll start with verse 14, and I'll jump around, all right? But if you will not hearken unto me and will not do all these commandments, and if ye shall despise my statutes, or if your soul abhor my judgments, so that ye will not do all my commandments, but that ye break my covenant, right? So if we break the covenant of the highest, that's what happened with the so-called Native Americans, with the Gadites, with the Reubenites, with all the 10 tribes over here, all right? We broke the covenant of the highest. We started to revert back to idolatrous ways, worshiping every aspect of nature as opposed to worshiping the Creator and Him only, all right? That's where we went off, all right? I also will do this unto you. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. He said, I'm going to bring diseases upon you, and ye shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. And I will set my face against you, and ye shall be slain before your enemies. You see that right there? They that hate you shall reign over you, and ye shall flee when none pursueth you. You see it right there? So he said, look, you're going to die in battle from your enemies, all right? And if you will not yet for all this hearken unto me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins, all right? So jumping down again, he said, I'm going to punish you 7 times more for your sins. All right. Here we go. Verse 23. And if ye will not be reformed by me by these things, but will walk contrary unto me, then will I also walk contrary unto you. We still haven't turned back to the Creator yet. All right. The God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and did his commandments. We still haven't turned back to him. And will punish you yet 7 times more for your sins. And I will bring a sword upon you that shall avenge the quarrel of my covenant. Right? So God brought the enemies against us. And when ye are gathered together within your cities, I will send the pestilence among you, and ye shall be delivered into the hand of the enemy. Right? So he brought the smallpox, he brought the measles, he brought the typhus, he brought the TB, he brought the influenza. All right? Which wiped out all the so-called Native Americans, like 90%. And when I have broken the staff of your bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven. They shall deliver you your bread again by weight. You shall eat it and not be satisfied, right? You're not going to have the food to be satisfied, all right? You're not going to have all the resources that you need because your enemy's going to come against you and you're all going to die by pestilence, all right? So, let's see. From there, we can actually get, I'll jump down. Verse 34. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths as long as it lieth desolate, and ye be in your enemy's land. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. You see that right there? So God said, look, y'all ain't been keeping the commandments in the land. Hey, the land's going to rest whenever it is desolate, whenever it gets destroyed, whenever you die from it, right? As long as it lieth desolate, it shall rest, because it did not rest in your Sabbaths when you dealt upon it, right? Because we didn't keep the Sabbaths the way that we should have. We didn't keep the high holy days the way that we should have. And upon them that are left alive of you, I will send a faintness into their hearts, in the lands of their enemies, and the sound of a shaken leaf shall chase them. They shall flee as fleeing from a sword, and they shall fall when none pursueth. And they shall fall one upon another, as it were before a sword when none pursueth. And here's the point that I wanted to get to. Ye shall have no power to stand before your enemies. So even though the people were very skilled militarily, very skilled in guerrilla combat, hey, we had no power because our power had left us. Our Creator had left us. And ye shall perish among the heathen, and the land of your enemies shall eat you up. And that's what's happening with the sisters now. All right, that's what's happening with the people now. The land of the enemies is eating us up. And they that are left of you shall pine away in their iniquity in your enemies' lands, and also in the iniquities of their fathers shall they pine away with them. You see that right there. So that's where we're at today, left to pine away in our sins. But there is hope. There is hope. I don't know if it shows the hope in Isaiah 65, but I do want to get that real quick. Because it talks about the same thing. Isaiah 65 and verse, it does show the hope in Isaiah 65 and verse 11. It says, but ye are they that forsake the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, right? That forget the land of Israel, that forget the Israelites, God's people, that prepare a table for that troop, and that furnish the drink offering unto that number. What troop? We're going to get that here shortly. The troop that overcame Gad. The word for troop in Hebrew is Gad. That's why Gad has the name Gad, is because of troop. Not only the troop that the Gadites are, but the troop that overcame them. All right, the military that overcame them. That would be the U.S. cavalry. All right, and that furnished the drink offering unto that number. Right, prepare a table for that troop and furnish the drink offering unto that number. That would be your Thanksgiving dinner, which is all about the genocide of the Gadites. All right, the Gadites originally up in the northeast of the U.S., but in general, Abraham Lincoln declared that there would be one Thanksgiving day as opposed to all the numerous Thanksgiving days, which used to be. There used to be numerous Thanksgiving days every time the U.S. cavalry would win a battle against the so-called American Indians. They would declare a Thanksgiving day for that specific battle. There were like 20 different Thanksgiving days. And Abraham Lincoln said, no, we'll consolidate that into one. The third Thursday in November or whatever it is. All right? Therefore will I number you to the sword, and ye shall all bow down to the slaughter. Because when I called, you did not answer. When I spake, you did not hear, but did evil before mine eyes, and did choose that wherein I delighted not. You see that right there. So if you choose Thanksgiving over the actual holy days of the Most High, then God said, you're going to be numbered to the sword. You're going to die. The same way that my people died to the troop that overcame them, you're going to die. All right? Because you're doing evil in the eyes of the Lord. All right? And Genesis 49, I'm going here to show the hope. And it's the same thing that we just read in in Isaiah 65. But a little context for Genesis 49, verse 1, it says, and Jacob called unto his sons and said, gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. Right? So it's all about what's going to happen to and for the tribes in the last days. Genesis 49 and verse, 19? Yeah. 19, it says, Gad, a troop shall overcome him, right? So he's using the name Gad, and he's kind of playing on the name Gad, right? Because the word or the name Gad means troop. So he's saying, look, about these Gadites, about this troop, right? The troop of the Lord, another troop shall overcome him. A different troop, right, shall overcome him. And that would be the U.S. cavalry. But he, meaning Gad, shall overcome at the last. All right. And with that, we'll go to Revelation 7 to show exactly what he's talking about. The resurrection of the 12 tribes in the last days. All right. In Revelation chapter 7, it says, and I heard the number of them which were sealed. And as we see up here in verse 3, it says, sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Right. So what is the seal that the servants of God are going to be sealed with? we'll get that real quick in Isaiah 8 and verse 16. This is the seal that he's making reference to. The servants of God are the only ones that can receive this seal. In Isaiah 8 and verse 16, it says, bind up the testimony, seal the law among my disciples, meaning my students. All right, so seal the law among my disciples, right? So the servants of God are going to be sealed with his laws. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel, right? So Jehovah's Witness be like, oh, 144,000 is the only people getting into the kingdom of heaven. That's not true, all right? But also, they say that can be anybody. Jehovah's Witness say, oh, that 144,000, you don't know who that is. It could be anybody. That's not true either, all right? This is 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. These are the leaders of the people here in these last days, all right? It goes on to say, the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. That's your so-called blacks here in America and the dispersed, of course. Just leave a little asterisk after I say all these tribes. I mean, have this little asterisk, I can't even say that word. But have this little thought in the back of your mind that whenever I say these tribes, I'm referring to over here in the West. But that also includes the dispersed around the world and the tribes in the East, all right? But it says, of the tribe of Judah, that would be your so-called African Americans, were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben, that would be your Creek family tribes of so-called natives, all right, were sealed 12,000. So the Creek family would include like the Seminole, the Muskogee, and even the Choctaw, as far as I can tell, were sealed 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad were sealed 12,000. That's what we've been talking about tonight. That's those 7 other families that I showed you on the map, all right? So that would be your so-called First Nations, your so-called Native Americans were sealed 12,000. That's Gad overcoming at the last, coming back to who we are as God's people, all right? All 12 tribes. The tribe of Asher were sealed 12,000. That would be your so-called Brazilians and South Americans. Of the tribe of Naphtali were sealed 12,000. Your Argentinians and Chileans. Of the tribe of Manasseh were sealed 12,000. Your so-called Cubans. Of the tribe of Simeon were sealed 12,000. That would be your so-called Dominicans. Of the tribe of Levi were sealed 12,000. Your so-called Haitians. Of the tribe of Issachar were sealed 12,000. Your so-called Mexicans. Of the tribe of Zebulun were sealed 12,000. That would be your so-called Guatemalans. Down to Panama, right? Your Panamanians, your Central Americans. Of the tribe of Joseph were sealed 12,000. Joseph here, he's using in place of Ephraim, because Ephraim received the birthright that Joseph was going to receive. That would be your so-called Puerto Ricans over here in the West. Of the tribe of Benjamin were sealed 12,000. Your so-called West Indian blacks over here in the West. All right, so all the 12 tribes going to rise up, all right, including Gad, the so-called Native Americans. All right, so there is hope. There is hope. All right. The only thing we can do is come back to our God and be more present in the lives of our children. I'm speaking specifically in reference to what's going on with these mostly young Native American women, even of childhood ages who are being kidnapped and murdered like this. The thing that we can do, the only thing we can do is come back together as a nation, right? Gather, O nation not desired, and be more protective over our families, right? Be more cohesive units as a family unit, all right? Be more protective over our women and daughters, right? Our mothers, wives and daughters, and then we'll begin to prosper, right? When we come together and, never stray alone, right? That's always a good rule when it comes to protecting women from these certain situations. But I will close it out with that in Zephaniah, because I always make reference to this to the prophet Zephaniah when it comes to what he said here in Zephaniah chapter 2. All right, because we just read in Revelation 7 how all the 12 tribes are going to stand up together. All right, gather yourselves together. Yea, gather together, O nation not desired. Right, as you can tell, the American government don't care about helping with the so-called indigenous, all right? They're the ones who started all this against the, so-called Native Americans, right? They're the ones who started this against the Gadites, started this persecution, started this oppression. They're not gonna save you, all right? They're not gonna save you. Before the decree bring forth, before the day passes the chaff, before the fierce anger of the Lord come upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger come upon you. Seek ye the Lord, all ye meek of the earth. So you got to be humble, you got to be obedient. That's what meek means. All right. Which have wrought his judgment, seek righteousness, seek meekness, right? So seek humility, seek obedience, seek his commandments. As I just pointed out, in Los Lunas, the first inhabitants over here in the continental U.S., they wrote down the commandments. They knew what they were supposed to do. They wrote down those 10 commandments on that rock. All right? They was keeping the law. So go back to what our forefathers did originally. Not when they went off and started worshiping all these nature spirits and whatnot, but come back to serve the Creator and him only. All right? It may be ye shall be hid in the day of the Lord's anger, right? Like that 144,000. So in that, and with that, hope y'all learned something. I'm going to close it out with Matthew 26. All right. The book of Matthew, chapter 26, and starting with verse 6. Now when Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, to what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this that this woman hath done be told for a memorial of her. So with that, I hope y'all learned something. Happy Sabbath, Happy New Year, right? Because we are officially in the new year now, right? We're in the springtime. The Passover is coming up very shortly. All right, next week I'll probably do a lesson on the Passover just so y'all know how to keep that and keep that to the fullest. All right. So with that, I'm gonna say shalom. Happy Sabbath, and let God be magnified.